Welcome to the Waterboy and Equipment Manager podcast. My name is Saif Basaria.
My name is Shaban Samani.
And I'm Case Charania.
And today we have a very special guest with us, employee of The Athletic and currently reporting on the Houston Rockets, Alykhan Bijani. Welcome to the pod, man.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys. Excited to be here.
Come on, hit us with your socials real quick and where we can find you on Twitter and Instagram, and then we'll jump into what we want to talk about today.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Rockets_insider. I have a YouTube channel as well on the Rockets called Rockets Film Room. So those two primary are the places you'll find me. There's other social media too, but primarily posting on those two for now. So
sounds good. Well, thank you for joining us today. All of us are very excited to have you.
Yeah, no, I've known you forever, Safe Boss. So I'm excited to be here as well.
Well, I may or may not have pulled in a favor. We'll see. Yo, Case, tell the people where we're at on Twitter, please.
So, big change, guys. You can find us everywhere at WBEM Pod.
Yeah, web and
change
pod.
The socials up. It's no longer Waterboy Manager and Waterboy and Equipment Manager. That shit was too long. You can find us at WBEM Pod.
Yep.
Everywhere.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Sweet.
You can call it WebM Pod if you want,
That's what you hear us.
I'm not doing that. I'm going to spell it out.
WebM Pod. I actually like that. That's nice.
It's nice and catchy. Yeah. And then hopefully people will
it just rolls off the tongue,
Like WebMD, WebM Pod. I like that. Yeah.
WebMD.
Yeah.
I didn't put that together, but I appreciate you pointing that out. It's easier for
That's
them.
why he's the professional.
You know what? That's probably true. That's
why he gets paid the big bucks.
Oh man.
Well, since the last time you heard us, listener, believe it or not, a lot happened in the NBA, but specifically, a lot happened in Houston, and Houston, we have a problem. Russell Westbrook is out of town. John Wall is now in town.
Title it.
And last we heard, James Harden is now in town. Alykhan, that's right?
Yes, he is in town.
You want to update us on what's going on with James Harden before we jump into more specifics?
Yeah, he pretty much won't be able to practice with the team until next week. So he has to get six negative COVID tests, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And once he clears that protocol, he'll be able to participate with the team. It's a big setback because they play 2 games this weekend. They play Friday and Sunday, and then next week he'll only have around 2 practices with his teammates before they play 2 more preseason games. And then all of a sudden the season starts the week after that. So it's a big setback because you're having a guy in Coach Silas, Steven Silas, who's inputting a new offense in. You have brand new coaches, except for John Lucas, who is very close and has a great relationship with James. But even then, when you have a new coaching staff, a new culture they're trying to build around, you need to have your leader there. And it is a setback to not have him there for them.
Well, so then let's jump into what we want to know on the podcast and across the NBA fandom. What do you think there's a realistic chance? And when I say realistic, I think we're thinking maybe above 65% chance that the Rockets and James Harden can kind of mend what seems to be not ideal of a relationship, and then James Harden stays with the team, and then this is all just us talking for fun, and the Rockets move on business as usual.
I really do think that there is a good chance they can make this work. And I'll tell you why. James has always wanted to win. He understands how important it is for his legacy to win a championship. I think he's going to go down no matter what happens. If he wins or doesn't win, as arguably, if you don't consider him the best, there's a certain case for that, but he's going to go down as either the best or second best offensive player to ever play the game. And when you have that sort of stature in the league, all you need is a championship to cement your legacy. And he understands that. He's a great businessman. He's a great person off the floor in terms of what he does in the community. All that is there, but he just wants to win, and he's going to do whatever it takes. And if that means requesting a trade to get him to another opportunity, he's going to do that. But as you've seen over these last few weeks, the Rockets really have tried to put together a team around him that he can say, you know what, maybe this team is somebody or a group of players I can hopefully work with and achieve a championship. So we'll see what happens. I think it's just going to come down to, is he willing to show up, play with the new team that he has here, and see where they go. I will say John Wall has looked great talking to the coaches. He's looked great in practice. That being said, he's coming off 2 major injuries, especially an Achilles one that really hampers a lot of players. There is new science in medicine and things like that where they can help his development. But I think if John Wall can get back to as close as he has been at his all-star level, especially defensively, that's really going to help James. And I mean, we can get into that later in terms of how they pair up together. But I really do think it's going to come down to, is he going to give this new roster a chance to show him that, you know what, this is a team that could possibly compete for a title.
So I'm glad you brought that up. It's important to understand that the Rockets, with the departure of Daryl Morey, Mike D'Antoni, Russell Westbrook, even Robert Covington, they are fundamentally a very different basketball team. The way even they'll play basketball is going to be different, especially with a brand new coach in Steven Silas. Do you feel in your heart of hearts that this is a competitive basketball team? And I mean that obviously with James Harden on the team, assuming he is there. And I think that's fair to assume, as of at least right now, he will be. This team is no question a playoff team. That's not what we're debating here. I don't think that debate has any merit, to be quite honest with you. But is this a basketball team that can compete for a Western Conference Finals or a championship berth?
I don't want to have a cop-out answer and say I don't know, but I think it's a legitimate answer. I don't know. There's a lot of unknowns with this roster, in that you have John Wall coming off 2 major injuries. You have DeMarcus Cousins coming off a major injury. You have Eric Gordon, who's trying to have a bounce back here. You have Daniel House. I mean, it's a lot of their main rotation players. You know, there is consistency there, but there's also a lot of unknowns. PG Tucker is about to turn 36 years of age. Yes, he's one of the best defensive players in the league, and one of the most underrated players in the league, in my opinion. But even then, there's still a lot of unknowns there. If you do have James, though, and as long as James has been with the Houston Rockets since 2012, he's been a 25-plus point per game scorer. He's going to elevate you to a playoff caliber team. And I think that continues. If he's still here, they're going to be at least fighting for, I think, a potential top 4 seed, because James Harden's that good. And I think we're, not me or not you, but I think collectively people are not giving him the props of how good of a basketball player he is, and are really limiting his stock level around the league.
I think that's fair. I think that a lot of that will stem and has stemmed from the narrative around James Harden when it comes time to quote unquote deliver, right? I don't think anybody, and maybe people are, but I don't think it's a substantiated argument to say he delivers in the regular season. He is perennially a top 5, if not top 3 MVP candidate year after year after year for the better part of his entire tenure in Houston. It is the playoffs that a lot of people question James Harden, and maybe sometimes it's fair and sometimes it's not. But that's neither here or there. They have a new.
And frankly, he's not helping his cause at the moment. He's actually hurting it. I mean, he represents himself. His mother helps represent him. He has his own team around him as well. He doesn't have an agent, and I think you're kind of seeing some of the weaknesses there, where you don't have somebody to help kind of guide you throughout this process. Like, I'm all for player empowerment. Trust me, I'm all for player empowerment. But as a human being, you want to see everybody thrive and be successful. I don't necessarily think he's helping his cause right now in terms of where he wants to go.
I think it's like you got to have someone to sort of like navigate those relationships for you.
Mm-hmm. And look, the Rockets aren't going to just trade him for penny on the dollar. You know, they're going to want a great haul in return. And I think the best case to look at this is there's multiple cases. Let's look at one. Drew Holiday with the Milwaukee Bucks. What do they get? They got multiple first-round picks, multiple pick swaps. That happened, right? Let's look at Chris Paul's trade when he was traded from the Rockets for Russell Westbrook. Thunder got 2 first-round picks and multiple pick swaps. Look at Chris Paul's trade to Phoenix. First-round picks, things like that. Like, they're going to want multiple first-round picks. They're going to want multiple pick swaps. The most important thing, and this is what I've been told the Rockets do want, is they want a young cornerstone player they can develop with. And we know there are those players around the league who fit that mold of young cornerstone. I don't have to say it, but let's see.
We'll play the speculation game in a few minutes. So hold off on. Yeah. I can see the smile brewing.
All right, let me jump in real quick.
Yes, please.
So you guys talked about James Harden's offensive prowess. Mm-hmm. And I just want to ask Alykhan, I'm not someone who watches the way James Harden plays offense that I enjoy at all. I don't like the free throws. I'm not knocking his skill at all. Okay. But would you say that there's a chance that his stats are inflated because of those numbers?
Okay. Now,
interesting, Cave. I like that you asked that question.
No, I think it's an interesting question, but
now, listener, realize that when we speak about James Harden, we say James Harden. Alykhan says James, so he will answer this question very differently from the way that you're used to hearing us.
Look, I'm not asking him to knock James Harden at all. I think James Harden's a fantastic basketball player. but his style of play is not something I enjoy as a basketball fan.
What I will say this, I think as a basketball savant, I think, and you guys are all basketball savants, you can appreciate the way he can manipulate the half court. And then I think if you ask any player, I've done stories where I've talked to multiple defenders around the league and asked what makes James Harden so difficult to guard, and they always say because you just can't prepare. You can only do so much, but you can't prepare because he's able to have so many counters, so many moves to do, which is why when you double and trap him so much, it's so successful because you're taking him away from doing what he does best and play make for others. So for me, when we have a traditional pick and roll defense against James Harden, as a fan, that's fun to watch. If you're a basketball fan, and we're all a basketball fan, that's fun to watch. I understand what you mean by inflated, but I think you can make the case that a lot of superstars play the same way. I think if you look at the way the trend is going with the league, James was just the first one to do it. You're seeing a lot of players around the league do play the same way James does. I think the biggest gripe, and I think it's a reasonable gripe, that he looks to take the three and the lane versus the mid-range, and other superstars will take the mid-range when it's offered to them. That's not to say James won't take it. He will. He's actually very good at post-ups, actually an elite scorer from the post-up as well when he hits a step back. But just for what he's good at and what the team wants and what's good for the offense around the team, he's going to take what he's good at, which is step back threes, pull up threes, layups, get to the free throw line. The reason why he's so good, and you're seeing a lot of players emulate that as well, is when he attempts to get fouled, what happens? He's not just going up like this. He's expanding his arm out like this, and you have no other choice but to hit it because your instincts tell you, I need to reach for the ball. I need to protect my basket. And that's what people do. They reach for the cookie jar, and he draws the fouls. He's not even leading the league in free throws. You know what I mean? So I understand your case. I know what you're trying to say, but I do think there's arguments on both sides. And in this case, I think he is fun to watch because he's able to manipulate defenses so well that if you talk to coaches, I mentioned players, even talk to coaches as well, they have so much struggles kind of dealing with that. I think the best example, and it's the last point I'll make on this topic, Coach Popovich was once asked about James Harden. He said, that's the one player I always watch film about before a game. That just tells you the respect level he has around the league in terms of how he can manipulate a defense, how he's so tough to guard against, because defenses have to be on their heels. You have to throw multiple bodies at him. You have to be able to throw different types of defenses at him. If you throw one similar defense at him, after two plays, he's going to figure it out and really stop you from doing that in the future. So you have to be able to throw gut wrenches, which is why the Lakers were so successful. I know I'm rambling on this topic, but
look, that's what
dude, you're fine.
We love it. Yeah, it's great.
That's why I asked it. Because you know more than I do.
No, that's a great question. I'll share one more example on the Lakers. What the Lakers did, which was so successful in the postseason against the Rockets, was they trapped James, and they had Russell Westbrook be a safety valve on the 4-on-3 situation. Sorry, but why that was so successful was for two reasons. One is that if you normally send a trap, James will be able to dissect it and he'll know who's open and he'll pass to that open guy. But what the Lakers were doing, they were actually rotating who was that secondary help defender that was coming. One possession it would be Kuzma coming from the opposite corner. One possession would be Anthony Davis coming from the baseline. One possession would be LeBron adjacent to the defenders coming over. So they kept him guessing, and he wasn't able to quickly calculate where the ball needed to go. It took him a few seconds, and that's all you need as a defense. Take him off his game for a few seconds for you to have your defense established and get him to throw the ball where you want to. And on top of that, when you don't have all 5 out floor spacers and you have to play Russell Westbrook and James Harden together to mitigate some of his offensive spacing inefficiencies, you have some of those things that happen, which is why I'm curious if James Harden plays this season with the Rockets, how that fit will be with John Wall, who's clearly developing his three-point shot. So I know I started from one direction, went to another in terms of your question, but I think all these things do come together in kind of answering that in terms of how good of a scorer he is, because there are ways to stop him, but it's very difficult to do so.
So then I want to go off script really quickly. There's two more things we'll hit, and then we'll jump into some of the more speculative, for fun, for the listener to enjoy at home kind of thing. But talk to me about, do you think, and I say this assuming that you might have some insight here, which is why you're here discussing this with us today. Do you think James Harden was consulted on John Wall prior to this happening? This trade between obviously Washington and Houston, where Wall and Russ, switched hands.
James Harden's consulted with any move the Rockets make.
I would assume so, right? That's fair. I think most smart teams. I think most smart teams consult their best players, like Lakers.
Yes.
I'm sure talk to LeBron and AD, and even in this case, Rich Paul. I'm sure every major basketball team makes those moves. So in that case, it's tough to speculate on what John Wall will look like, considering we haven't seen him play 50 games of basketball since 2017. We haven't seen anything close to that in quite some time. I think even John Wall is going to look not so much like John Wall when he comes back, because he's changed his game. He has to. Especially next to James Harden. The beauty is he's a fantastic facilitator, still a good scorer. He's going to get to the rim. But the question mark becomes, how much different is John Wall than Russell Westbrook? And it is not fair, I think, at least, for us to speculate because we haven't seen him. I think we have to see him. We have to see what he's done. He said he's worked on his shot. I think everything out of Houston is he's working on that shot because it's incredibly important for John Wall to have a shot, a consistently reliable shot for James Harden to trust him to take. The one thing I want to know is we talked about James Harden's game being a lot of threes and a lot of stuff at the rim. He was an elite mid-range scorer before Mike D'Antoni and Daryl Morey installed a new system. Those two guys aren't in Houston anymore. Now it's Steven Silas. How much do you think that will change James Harden? Because he could easily go back to becoming an elite. I mean, his elbow jumpers were something to be marveled at. Some of the best in basketball. The efficiency numbers were insane. They're not the most
50%.
efficient. Yeah. And so the efficiency numbers from basketball analytics, the analytics boys don't necessarily love that shot. But James had it, and it was incredible. Do you anticipate seeing a difference in his game? Maybe not by a ton, but do you anticipate seeing a difference here?
That's a conversation we're going to have to see once he and Coach Silas actually talk. It was on Wednesday when we found out that Coach Silas said that all he did in terms of talking to James Harden was say hello. So until they have those conversations and until we can see on the film, I honestly can't tell you. I think it'd be great for him to attack those types of defenses when they're kind of giving that up, especially when they're playing drop coverage. The reason why that defense is so successful, it actually started in 2017 in the conference semifinals against the Spurs. Coach Popovich had Paul Gasol at the rim, Kawhi Leonard fight over screens, and all James Harden had was everything in between the 3-point line and around the rim. He had nothing else. He couldn't. If he drove to the rim, there was Paul Gasol taking away everything, and they helped off the corner. And if he wanted a three, and at that point in time, his step back three wasn't as good as it is now, by the way, which is why he added that counter the following season. But you see that, and that's when he started working on his floater, working on his step back three. Now, if you go over the screen, he'll just isolate on you. He's so consistent and so efficient at that step back three. He's going to take it. So I think when you look at it from that perspective and how good he is at that step back three shot, you live with that. You live with that as James Harden. You live with that as a team because he's so good and he's so efficient at that. It's the same way I think about a guy like Luka Doncic, or the same way I think about a guy like Anthony Davis or LeBron James. When you're so good at a shot, no matter how bad it must be or whatever we think of it as spectators of the NBA, they're going to take that shot because they are efficient at that shot and it's something they can get to easy. And James, that step back three is a counter. Now, I'll bring in another thing. He has actually developed a counter to the step back three counter. And what I mean by that is the Bucks were famous for kind of just playing to his side like this. And he would just say, hey, drive to the rim. He's like, oh, you know what? Okay, I'm a left-handed shooter. All I have to do is isolate on the right side and step back to my right and shoot with my left hand because I'm already square to the rim. And it worked every time. So he always has a counter. I think in terms of mid-range, we may see that, but I wouldn't say that he's going to completely get rid or decrease exponentially his volume from those step back threes. And he's so good at it. He's worked on that for multiple seasons now. That's his shot. I mean, we all have players who have their signature shot. James is a step back three. It's not going anywhere.
Well, I mean, let's not act like this is a new notion in basketball. We're well aware. The signature shot has existed for as long as basketball has existed, right?
Yeah.
With the sky hook, Hakeem with the dream shake. This is not a new notion. James Harden has just found a shot that is what we consider very close to unguardable, like the sky hook. It's one of the most unguardable shots in the league. And I think Shaban's boy over there, Luka Doncic, is learning very quickly how awesome and efficient, and by the way, energy saving that shot can be for a player like thick boy James Harden and a little thick boy Luka Doncic. It's a good way to preserve your energy in the game. That's how these guys go as long as they do, especially when the team is so reliant on them. Shaban, I know you wanted to discuss basketball fit, so let's transition to maybe somewhat of a speculation game. But I know, Shaban, you want to talk about basketball fit with John Wall and James Harden and the rest of the team. So I'm going to let you kind of ask about it, Shaban. What are you thinking?
Yeah. So, John Wall is obviously one of, but when he was healthy, he was one of the most ball dominant guards in the NBA. How do you see, because we've seen James Harden try to mesh with ball dominant guards for the last 4 years. Chris Paul, Russell Westbrook. Now it's going to be John Wall. How do you see those two meshing together on the same basketball court?
So let me just share with you kind of, because I've been asking Steven Silas a lot of basketball questions, because everybody's asking about James Harden questions. All right, James Harden questions.
I'm sure he's very much tired of those, and I don't blame him.
I mean, there's only so much about James Harden we can ask, right? He's not really going to say anything. He's focused on the basketball team, which he's definitely demonstrated and shown. So let's talk about the basketball. I'm glad you asked that. When it comes to John Wall, there's a couple things he's pointed out about John Wall that really intrigue me. Number one, he said that John Wall is a great passer, and he's highlighted that passing ability multiple times in press conferences, which leads me to think that we'll see many, many minutes with John Wall as a lead ball handler, and they're going to utilize him in that 5-out setting to do that. Now, if and when James is here, James is going to have the ball a lot, and I think what we're going to see is very similar to what the Mavs did, especially with Luka and Porzingis, or other teams do. They're going to stagger their stars. They're going to stagger John, and they're going to stagger James. I think this is where James not being here is a very critical problem, because you're starting to see John Wall and Christian Wood develop great chemistry. And that kind of tells me that John Wall and Christian Wood will probably anchor that second unit together, especially if they show that during the preseason games, they are starting to build a chemistry. Now, once James comes back, let's see which one of those bigs he gets into a good chemistry with, because James is at his best when he has a pick and roll big who he can set a hard screen, dive hard to the rim, and catch some lobs or pick and pop. 5-out is great for him, but once he has that vertical spacing back, it really allows him to have more space to get into the lane. There's a certain terminology in the NBA called alignment, and it's about shooting. So in 5-out, alignment is about whether you have 3 shooters and 2 shooters on one side separately, or you have 2 and 2. Sorry, not 3 and 2. Sorry, you have 2 shooters on both sides, or you have 3 and 1. So that's a very common thing. James loves 3-1 alignment, and what that means is 3 shooters on one side, 1 on the opposite, and he will always drive to the side with 1 shooter. Why is that? Because if he's going 1-on-1 against somebody, that's less space, and that's a lesser chance of a help defender coming over.
Let me pause you real quick. Case, real quick trivia question: who is normally that one shooter by himself in the corner?
PJ Tucker.
Damn straight it is. Damn
It's
straight.
always PJ.
We watch our basketball.
How is that a trivia question?
How
is that a trivia question?
Or Eric Gordon. It's actually Eric Gordon is probably I think Eric Gordon is the one shooter a lot of people forget who's really good from that wing area, and he's often on that side as well. But yeah, it's PJ Tucker, Mr. Automatic from 3 in the corners. Leads the NBA in corner threes, actually. I mean, that guy, I'm surprised that he hasn't gotten a contract extension. I'm actually 36 years old.
Are you surprised? Are you surprised?
I'm surprised because how good of a player he is at this point of his career and how good of a shape he keeps himself in. But that being said, the Rockets understand he's 36 years old, and I think they're making a business decision on being careful about any types of conversations they have on that end.
I'm surprised of his sneaker collection, actually.
He has a partial guarantee for this season. I think what would have been great, even if they had not given him extension, is last season just guaranteeing his contract fully, even before the season had started, just to give him that validation. He wants you to be here long term. He loves it here in Houston. His family lives here in Houston. I mean, he's Houston.
Is it fair to say that from PG Tucker's standpoint, and then we'll jump to some of the more interesting things that I know the listeners actually hear about, besides obviously the basketball on court, is it fair to say if this was maybe the NFL, they would front load and add more money to this year's contract for PG Tucker if they could? Because we agree he's definitely underpaid for what he does for Houston, and especially what he does for James Harden. There's no question about his value to this team and to this player.
You know, that's a great question. I'm not the best in terms of CB. I think I'm going to come out and say that immediately. I do know some things, but from what I understand, once you have a partial guarantee, it's hard to do that. Now, if we were playing the vacuum and he had no contract this year, I think yes, you would want to front load as much as you can.
Oh, by the way, I'm not implying that that's doable. I'm saying I'm sure they wish they could have done it. By no means is that actually possible within the CBA.
Yeah. But no, I agree. I definitely think as a reward for how well he's played and how important he's been to their franchise the last 4 years, this is fourth season here. Yeah, I guarantee they probably will.
Then again,
front loaded a contract.
Then again, how close will you stand for at least Tillman slander for 2 seconds from me, or is that probably off limits here?
Nah, man, y'all do what you got to do. You tell me. What do you think?
I mean, look, the guy, we know the guy is, routinely not willing to spend money. Maybe he's happy with PJ Tucker at the discount. He'll give him some coupons to his steakhouse down the street in Houston and call it a day. I'm sure Tillman will be very happy with that outcome. And that's where I will leave that. I don't think the Rockets are calling me anytime soon. Next up, let's talk about this Russell Westbrook.
Hold up, before we move on.
Yes, please.
You talked about James Harden loving having a hard-hitting pick-and-roll big. How is Boogie look?
That's a good question.
So we're not allowed to watch practice because of COVID.
Okay.
Usually we would be there to kind of see a little bit. I will say, from my conversations with those who are watching, he looks great.
I love to hear Boogie
still,
news, bro.
He's still trying to come back. I mean, he hasn't played in a while, so he's come off a major injury. But
I think he's back on the John Wall side. Yeah.
I think John Wall and Boogie's relationship, I think the biggest thing for them here is that they're proving themselves to be leaders in this locker room. One thing that I do want to read out that John Wall, not John Wall, DeMarcus Cousins said today in our media availability. He said, guys that are here, we're coming out working every single day. Hopefully, whenever it is James Harden comes in and joins us, he matches the energy of the group. He said, my concern is making sure everybody in this locker room is together, coming in, ready to work every single day. Our identity is team first. That's what we're preaching. Since day one, he's taking Christian Wood under his wing. He's trying to have him and John Wall kind of be vocal leaders in the locker room. I think, albeit the James Harden saga going on, I think that's as good of a thing you can ask for when it comes from the Rockets about DeMarcus Cousins coming in, being a leader, establishing a foundation, a different culture. Coach Silas has been talking a lot individually with John Wall and DeMarcus Cousins about what they like, what they would like from a team, off the court, on the court perspective. I think it's going to be a great fit for him here. He's already become a fan favorite. But let's see. Let's temper your expectations. Let's see what happens starting Friday to see what he comes back from. But from all I've heard, he looks fantastic. I think he's going to be a difference maker as a sixth man off the bench. I do think Christian Wood will start at the 5, and Boogie will also play the 5 as well off the bench. But don't discount closing lineup possibilities with Christian Wood and DeMarcus Cousins, because the coaching staff really likes the possibility of both of them playing together at the same time.
Well, the beauty is everything we've heard about Christian. What we know about Christian Wood, when we've heard about Boogie, is both those guys are going to be at least league average shooters from deep, and that is obviously going to help the Rockets, which will allow them to be on the court at the same time. Shaban, you had a question?
Yeah. So I think it's interesting how you bring up the dynamic between John Wall and Boogie Cousins. They're both University of Kentucky teammates back in college. And you mentioned about like how you've been hearing from the grapevine that they both look great, they both look ready, they both look motivated, they're ready to go. So should a trade for James Harden happen, how is it just star or bust with it, or could they really afford to get some more ancillary players? We'll get to the speculative side a little bit, but like, could they afford to say, get some more players to, bolster their depth, get some ancillary starters in there, or, someone that actually like build a team around John Wall and Boogie Cousins, because, the wing or the perimeter guy and the guy inside, that's kind of an easy blueprint to build a team around, right?
So I'm waiting for this possible trade packages that you guys are saying.
I have 7 for you, but we'll get there.
Okay. I will say, if the only way they're going to trade James Harden is if they get a haul, and I'm literally telling you what we know, in terms of this is exactly what the Rockets want. They want a young cornerstone, possible MVP player. They want multiple young players. They want picks. They want swaps. I mean, they want a mother load for James, and so I just don't. I speculated this, and I believed this 2 weeks ago, even before the John Wall trade. I said James Harden would be here at the start of training camp. He would be here starting the regular season. I still believe that. Trade deadline after the season, what happens, we don't know. But he will be here to start the season.
Okay. So
they haven't. Well, as of right now, they haven't seen a trade package they liked. So they want to put that out there.
That's fair. So before we get to the James Harden trade packages, let's quickly discuss the Russ trade. Obviously, from everything we've read online, from the ESPNs and the Athletics of the world, this was a conversation that has been happening for quite some time up until draft night. Then it stopped happening, supposedly, and then it kind of picked back up and happened the same day that we heard it actually happen. Now, that's the story that I've read online, so I'm sure you're more privy to what actually happened. So talk to us quickly about that. But more importantly, my question is, besides this trade, was there a realistic market for Russell Westbrook? And if not, was it just the contract that was a question, or was there questions about the player? Because I, for one, think Russell Westbrook is a fantastic basketball player. And I think I don't think most people would disagree with that statement. And I think the contract was probably the biggest deterrent. But you know more than I about this conversation. Tell me if there was a market here for Russell Westbrook.
Safe's hot take is Russell Westbrook is good at basketball.
I will say Russell Westbrook is an MVP caliber player on the court, but I think he's even better of a person off the court. I think that's one of the biggest things I learned about him covering him. Dude's a great teammate. I've never heard players rave about a teammate so much while he was here. I firsthand saw a lot of great things he did with a player with the workers at Toyota Center, and the stories I've heard. I mean, he's a great guy, and so I wish him all the best. He was very nice to me. I know he has his reputation with the media. He was very nice to me. Always answered my questions nicely and stuff. So all the best to him in Washington. Now, to answer your question about the trade, it all comes down to James Harden, and there's multiple things. Number one, they're still best friends, or they're still really close friends. Their friendship was not hindered or hampered or whatever word you want to call it after all this happened. They understood if they want to win, that playing together may not be the best way. And then in terms of everything that went down with James and kind of what was going on with the offseason with D'Antoni, Morey and stuff, that all played a big role in everything happening. I will say one really interesting thing, which kind of ties into the whole timeline of all this. Steven Silas said that Russell Westbrook was one of his biggest advocates during the coaching process. And the fact is that Steven Silas got hired, and now Russell Westbrook's with Scotty Brooks in DC, who Scotty Brooks and Russ are very, very close. I think that's one underrated thing about that trade. Even one coach who can really get Russ to open up and to play to his strengths is Scotty Brooks. So I think Russ is going to have a fantastic year. He's going to be an all-star. I think he's going to have an amazing year. And I really do think that him and Scotty Brooks and that Wizards team can potentially fight for that 8 to 7 seed in the playoffs.
So back to the question. Was there a market for Russell Westbrook that you know of?
No.
Okay. That's the easy answer that I wanted to know. That's what I wanted to know. Because look, in all fairness, I think, again, like you've mentioned, like we've mentioned on this podcast many, many, many times, I don't think anyone's arguing whether he's a good basketball. He's clearly a very good basketball player. He's clearly liked by more guys in the league. The narrative around Russell Westbrook is a very interesting one. His relationship with the media is not clearly indicative of his relationship with his teammates and those around the league. He's clearly very respected, loved, and beloved. I mean, even Kevin Durant, the guy who left him, talks highly of him when he gets the chance to do so. So it's not as though Russell Westbrook is disliked in a humanistic sense. And I think that's fair to go off of. But that was interesting. I wanted to know, the contract seems like it was a deterrent enough to end conversations before they could even begin.
Just from what I understand, they weren't getting the package they thought they initially would. And when the trade occurred with the Wizards, that was a trade that actually worked out for them. They got a first round pick. I mean, that's you can't be picky when the value goes down like that, especially with how everything played out. But from what I understand, there wasn't that big of a market for him.
I don't know if you got a chance or not on your many radio hits or your hits on The Athletic, but did you get a chance to give a grade to the trade for both teams? And if you didn't, are you willing to give us one now? I know this is maybe much, and if you're not willing to, that's okay.
I'll tell you exactly how I felt when it happened, and I'll tell you how I feel right now.
Well,
When it happened, I actually did a TV hit, and that same question was asked me. How do you feel about this trade? And I said, in a vacuum, if John Wall can come back to where he is a better fit next to James Harden. I'll tell you why. Because if you look at the usage rate for all the superstars James Harden has played with as a sidekick, you have Dwight Howard, Chris Paul, Russell Westbrook. The one player who had a usage rate higher than 25% was Russell Westbrook. Chris Paul, for how good of a player he is, and one of my favorite players to watch. Dwight Howard, for how good of, Dwight Howard is Dwight Howard in terms of he's a big.
Well, Dwight Howard at that time was a different Dwight Howard. We're not talking.
I'm talking about from a guard perspective. Sorry, sure. Dwight Howard, Hall of Famer. But in terms of Chris Paul and Russell Westbrook, just guard dominant ball handlers, like Shaban mentioned earlier. Chris Paul never escalated that number for his usage rate. Russell Westbrook did. John Wall, when he comes in here, he's not going to escalate that usage rate. He's probably going to hover back down to where Chris Paul was. And I think that could possibly help have the Rockets see some success in a vacuum if he's able to do some of the things he's improving on and some of the things he was able to do before. John Wall always knew what he do. He can always go left, and he can finish with either hand off his foot, or he can attack with the mid range. Now he's working on going right, hitting pull-up threes. Those things, let's see if they're able to help James, especially with how defenses will play him. They're going to dare early in the season, especially for John Wall to shoot the basketball. And he's going to have to prove to NBA defenses he can do so at a 35 to 38 to 40% clip. And if he does that, that could possibly just become an A for the Rockets because you have a good fit next to James, somebody who can anchor the second unit. You get a first-round pick, even though it's protected out of it. In the vacuum, I keep saying it's an A. Okay? Now, right now, I still don't know how I feel about that trade. I would have liked to see Russell Westbrook and James Harden come back for a second season. I think with the way Coach Silas was playing things, and from the sounds of it, it was going to be very exciting. A lot of ball movement, a lot of player movement-oriented things. I think Russell and James would have both thrived in that sort of offense. But we won't see that anymore. So, I don't know. So, I still don't know how I would grade it, but if John Wall can come back and play to how I think he will, could potentially be an A for the Rockets.
Yeah. So, Case, because Alykhan is being Mr. Politics right now, and I don't necessarily blame him. Case, because we haven't talked about it on the podcast, can you give the Rockets a grade for how you think this trade went for the Rockets?
The Rockets got an A.
You think so?
Wow.
Yeah, they got that first round pick back, and then you get a player who has the potential to be exactly what Russell Westbrook was, or even better. Now that he's been working on his game, he's developed somewhat of a decent shot. You can count on that.
Potentially, that's fair.
Well, guys, I think it's unfair to grade though until we see him on the court. Like let's say this trade happened after like one or two preseason games, it would at least give us an indication of where he's back athletically. Even though he'll probably get better as he plays more minutes in games. But even then, I just don't think it's fair to grade right now because we just don't know. We can say I think that's why it's fair to say in a vacuum. And that's why I'm saying that, because in a vacuum, ideally, in terms of how his role will be here, he's going to be a great fit. But we just don't know because we don't know how he is athletically.
I'm kind of in that same boat as well. Yeah, I'm kind of in that same boat as well. It's really more like this trade gets an incomplete. John Wall hasn't played organized ball in 2 years.
I do
it's
think
really
it's
difficult.
I do think it's an A for the Wizards, though. I think it's a fantastic fit for them.
That's where we're going. Yeah.
I'm very excited to see him and Bradley Beal together. I'm definitely be watching a lot of Wizards games for sure. So that should be fun.
Well, yeah, that was the next question, Shaban. For the Wizards, A plus, A minus, B?
Yeah. A player that's played basketball is better than a player that hasn't played basketball, right?
That's in a vacuum, like Alykhan said.
In a vacuum, yeah. But it remains to be seen. Time will tell. I may end up eating my words on John Wall.
Look, I'm sure the fans of the Houston Rockets would hope that you do. Let's move on. Now, I know, Alykhan, you have said to us that you do expect and believe that James Harden will be a member of the Houston Rockets December 22nd when the season starts, maybe going towards the trade deadline and potentially towards the end of the season. All that is speculation, and it's obviously very hard to say yes or no, absolutely. However, that's what we're supposed to do on this podcast. We're going to play. I did what basically every other person in sports media got to do this week in the last few days, is open up ESPN Trade Machine and start plugging it. However, what I did differently was I wanted to discuss with you the two obviously mainstream trade packages, and I'll get to those in a second, that we've heard from the ESPNs and the Athletics of the world. And then I actually came up with 5 trades on my own that at least I haven't seen anywhere else. And it's more so in the sake of fun, entertaining basketball.
Yeah, so in the sake of fun, entertaining basketball, let's do it. I'm down.
Sounds good. So obviously the first one, James Harden would love to be part of the Brooklyn Nets. I was about to say New Jersey. It's still in my brain. But the Brooklyn Nets, it is a report that has come out from your buddy Shumps, another buddy of yours, Woj. I get to say that, which is very cool to me. But yeah, I mean, look, really credible sources have had this discussion. So it's worth at least discussing, right? Yeah. The trade package is something to the likes of, and this is not confirmed, as you can imagine, but Spencer Dinwiddie, Jared Allen, Karis LeVert, Taurean Prince to help make the money work, and then basically every single pick arsenal that you could do with sending him and then swapping them. I don't know how much I love that trade package, to be very honest with you, but my opinion doesn't matter, even though this is our podcast. Your opinion is today. Do you like that trade package from a Houston perspective? Because obviously they love it. They get James Harden, the Nets do. What about Houston?
The Rockets are not going to take 50 cents on the dollar with that trade package.
So that's how you feel about it. You think it's 50 cents on the dollar here?
You can get. Look, I'm very high on Karis LeVert. I think he's a fantastic player, and I selfishly want to watch him next to Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. I think he's going to be fantastic with both of them as they're both aging. But the Rockets can do better. It's James Harden, perennial MVP. You don't just give him up for somebody who took a step last season in the bubble. You want somebody who has potential to be an MVP, who has taken multiple steps already.
So I think it's important to realize for the listeners at home, if you forgot, Karis LeVert's 26. It's not like he's some 23-year-old Brandon Ingram, Jason Tatum, even Jaylen Brown kind of guy. He's not even in that caliber, at least in my opinion. I think I speak for everyone in this podcast. And that's not disrespect. He's clearly a very good basketball player, and he got the bag, or at least a good bag. But yeah, I think that trade offer is here today on December 9th when we record this podcast, and it will be here January 9th and February 9th and March 9th. Yeah. You get my point. That trade offer is on the table, and I don't think that's coming off the table under almost any circumstance. So let's discuss the other one. The other one is an interesting one simply because it is Daryl Morey's new team. It is almost as if you break up with your ex and then immediately trade your best player to your ex, if that was how trades work, or how relationships work for that matter.
No, it's like you break up with her ex and she takes the couch.
Oh wow!
Well, it's got to be like the best scoring couch in the history of scoring couches, though, right? Like it's got to be a really good couch.
It's like your couch. It's like the couch with your little indentation on it, and that's
I think a better thing to take would have been a dog, bro.
That's probably
you missed out with couch.
Yeah, I mean, Shaban, you have a dog. That's disappointing. But anyway, look, the other one.
Not everyone can relate to that.
Well, everyone can relate with a couch.
Yeah,
I've never had that good at couch, bro. I've never had that good at couch. We're not doing this.
Okay, basketball boys. That's what we're here to do. So the other one is obviously with the Philadelphia 76ers.
Okay.
And it's something to the likes of obviously Ben Simmons. Look, for those of you at home that are telling me, Tobias, shut up, please stop it. Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid, and more likely Ben Simmons, has to be a part of this conversation, or this conversation isn't happening. Genuinely, I have no inside sources, and I know it's that simple. So for those of you that have inside sources, you should know it's that simple as well. So Ben Simmons, Shake Milton, Matisse Thybulle, maybe a pick. What is too much, right? What is too much from the Philly side? And what's fair? You build that package for me. What do you think? Or at least what are your beliefs? And again, I want to reiterate for the listeners at home and those that like to aggregate, this is not a report. We're just ESPN trade machining right now.
Oh God, you just reminded me of the aggregators. Oh God, see now I don't want to do this anymore. Oh my God,
That's why
I have a story about aggregators. Let me tell you, I have a gripe with aggregators. But you know what? I'm gonna be nice today. I'm not gonna say anything. All right. So
that's why I want to like for my friend Alykhan, I will constantly remind people at home we are ESPN trade machining this baby. We are not by any means reporting anything.
Okay. So I'll be quick with this one. And I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. They want a young player who's a cornerstone potential MVP player. They want another possible young player. They want picks and they want swaps. I think Ben Simmons fits that criteria, right? I think he does. But let's see. Let's see if Philadelphia is willing to even put him on the table. That conversation will have to take place to see if that happens.
Let's assume they are. What else needs to be? Is that enough? Is Ben Simmons and whatever salary filler needs to happen, whatever that may be, Ben Simmons basically for James Harden. Is that enough?
I think you may need to include some picks in there because James Harden is James Harden. I mean, I think this goes back to that. It's not your fault. Like you're asking me the question here. James Harden is arguably one of the top 3 players in the league right now. Okay, that's arguably right. Now, when it comes down to that, you have to value him for what he's worth. He is worth a lot of picks. He's worth a lot of swaps. He's worth a young franchise cornerstone you can build around in the future. And you trade for James Harden if you're completely all in on winning a championship in the next 3 to 5 year window, right? Mm-hmm. The guy you want to get back is somebody you could potentially build a contender around and eventually get to a championship team in the next 3 to 5 years as the Rockets, right? So based off of that, you want picks. That cornerstone.
Can I step in here? Is that the Rockets timeline with a potential James Harden trade? Having a 30-plus-year-old John Wall, having a 30-plus-year-old Boogie Cousins.
No, I was just right. No, I was just kind of showing like if those types of trade happen. Okay. Obviously, Tillman Fertitta wants to contend every single year. He does not want to rebuild,
and so get luxury tax. Sorry, that was just me being an ass. Look, Alykhan, you don't have to agree with me. Alykhan, I'm not asking you to agree with me. The Rockets aren't calling me.
Right, look,
you. I would.
No.
We'll put a disclaimer on this.
No. Look.
Anything that comes out of our mouths, Alykhan does not support.
I'm a very objective person when I cover a team. Okay, so let me just say this: when it comes to the Rockets, we have to acknowledge 2 things, and I think both are very, very honest to say. He has not paid the luxury tax, and until he does so, fans and a lot of people will question it and say, "Are you willing to pay to win a championship?"
I think that's a fair.
Because you look at what the goal. I completely agree. Yeah. I think it's 100% fair question, and I myself ask it all the time. You have a team. You have James Harden. Are you willing to pay the luxury tax to do so? And as of right now, it's looking like they probably will have to this season. Okay, so number 1. Number 2, he has said multiple times. He has told his staff. He has told everybody he is willing to pay into the luxury tax. But that goes back to my first point. Is he willing to do so? That's a great question to ask. I have no gripes with that question because I myself asked that question too. Are you willing to pay it, and will you pay it? Let's see if he does so this season.
Sure. So back to Philadelphia. We're talking Ben Simmons and Matisse Thybulle and 1 first-round pick. Do you think that gets the job done here?
Probably 2.
Probably two.
Do from a Philadelphia perspective, do you feel like I'm okay, I'm good, I don't want to do that, I don't want to send 2 picks?
I think if you have James Harden on your team with Joel Embiid and just the players on that roster, Danny Green and players like that, I mean that's a great roster. It gives you a chance to compete. Yeah. I think if you look at it this way. I mean, any team trading for James Harden has to look at it this way. Is your team good enough to get past Milwaukee if you're in the East or the Lakers if you're in the West? And if the answer is no, I don't know if you will give up your franchise cornerstone. If your answer is yes, I think it's worth the price. I mean, Milwaukee is fantastic. The Lakers are fantastic, but both are beatable teams. If adding James Harden, for example, to the Nets makes them a championship level team that's better than the Bucks, you do it. And I think that's the argument that even Morey is having to have a conversation with himself about. Is it worth trading Ben Simmons for this season to give myself a shot to beat the Nets, to beat the Bucks, and to beat the Lakers? And I think if he says yes to that, you'll see a trade. If he doesn't, we'll see. I mean, we'll see it. See, aggregators are going to take that. I'm not saying he's going to trade for James. I'm saying it gives him more of an inkling to decide which way he wants to go, one way or another.
Sure. Again, this is ESPN trade machine talk with some buddies that do a podcast. In no means is this reporting or substantial in any way possible.
Look, we're not nationally syndicated or anything.
Those two
unless
maybe those two trade packages have been at least speculated on by more than people that are on this podcast here today. The next ones that I will give to you have not been speculated, at least not to my knowledge, by anybody else on this podcast besides myself. Quite literally.
Boy. Here we go.
Together
because you don't like to prepare us.
Well, no, I like to get blind reactions to things that we can probably build. Look, you guys all watch basketball. You guys can make things happen. I believe in you, and I believe in your ability to do so. So these are all trades that I put together for the sake of very fun to see good basketball in. It doesn't necessarily mean that it is realistic or fair. It just means that it can happen. And then we'll jump to some other stuff that we're going to do here today, right? So let's look at this. One of the fun destinations, and this is only if Pat Riley and the Miami Heat have decided, okay, Giannis not coming, Giannis definitely not going to happen, which by the way, I believe that to be the case. I believe Giannis will resign. That's a personal opinion that we can talk about later in the podcast based on your facial reaction, Alykhan. However, assuming they are out of the Giannis sweepstakes and they are no longer in belief that will happen. If they do believe it, there's no trade for James Harden. And that's not an indictment on James Harden. It's just Giannis is younger and Giannis is a two-time, back-to-back MVP. If you got that guy, you go for it. But if you don't, James Harden is a very good consolation prize. So here's the trade, and it is not ideal for Houston. I will say this much. You have to begin by putting Tyler Herro in the talk. Houston doesn't even pick up the phone if you don't say Herro is definitely a piece that we're moving, right? Yeah. So we're talking Tyler Herro, we're talking Precious Achiuwa. They're what, 17th pick from this year's draft? No, 15th pick. Their early pick from this year's draft. Kendrick Nunn, and then you have to put Kelly Olynyk and Andre Iguodala to make the money work. And Miami is one of the few teams in the NBA who don't actually hold their next two picks, but they hold the two after that. And so they can send two picks in 2026 and 28 or 25 and 27 are, I believe, the picks that would have to go. And they'd have to be unprotected, if I'm being very honest. They have to be unprotected, considering the assets being exchanged. So we're talking Precious Achiuwa, Tyler Herro, Kendrick Nunn, Andre Iguodala, Kelly Olynyk, two picks, and then another pick swap if that's what needs to happen. Alykhan, thoughts?
Would you take the trade if you were a GM?
No, I wouldn't. However, I would I would love two things, in case you will agree with me here. James Harden in Miami with Jimmy Butler and Bam would be fun. And more importantly, Case, what is Miami very famous for that James Harden likes to go to a lot?
Strip clubs.
Yeah, I think James Harden would be very happy. And by the way, for those of you that don't know, there's actually someone on Reddit did this in the NBA offseason and did like a whole study of how James Harden supposedly plays better, legitimately better, in cities that have
strip clubs,
gentlemen's clubs. I don't know how much I believe it, but the stats were pretty astounding.
Numbers don't lie.
Look, no comment.
He could be a 5-time he could play till he's 40 in Miami. He could play till he's 40 in Miami if he plays in Strippy City. But anyway, Kays, what do you think? James Harden, Miami?
It'd be fun to watch.
Yeah. Do you think the Rockets would pick up the phone on this call at all?
I don't think it'd get offered.
Do you think it's fair that we're maybe
it'd be a fair offer?
No, I'm saying, do you think it'd be fair to say that we're a little overreacting on bubble Tyler Herro by a little bit by saying this is the corner piece?
Oh, 100%.
You think so?
Oh, yeah, maybe.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You don't think so? Oh, wow. Okay. You don't think so? Huh?
I
don't think so.
Okay,
I think
so let me explain. I think Tyler Herro could be a fantastic player, but what we fail to realize is there was no one talking in the bubble. There was no fans. There's no jeering at him. There's no cheering. It's just ball. And we've seen from all these pickup games that NBA players usually play in the off season, everyone is fucking fantastic when there's no one watching. Or to be fair, no one cheering or booing at you. When it's just ball players excel.
That's
You
fair.
don't know how fans will play. And he was a rookie, so being in the bubble probably helped him quite a bit.
I mean, it helped guys like David
let's see what
Robinson.
happens.
Yeah, it helped a lot of guys. Let's do another one. Another team that may or may not love their star right now is the Clippers of Los Angeles, or hopefully eventually San.
Wait, the robot or the one that wants to retire there?
Look, could it potentially be a conversation?
Retire there?
Look, Paul George reports have now
Like,
said,
yeah, okay.
would like to retire in.
Remember, he also said that about Indiana and Oklahoma City.
Do y'all know Captain Crunch? Do you know the captain? I like to call the captain on this.
I know.
I like that. I like that a lot. Well done, Alykhan. So, could there be a conversation? Look, if Houston's interest is to stay relevant right now and be competitive right now, could there be James Harden going to the Clippers for Paul George, Lou Williams? If there needs to be another player, they could do like a Luke Kennard. That would have to wait a little bit because of NBA rules and regulations on trading players that were just acquired. And then they don't have any picks or any swaps because OKC owns all of them. But so they can't really put a pick here. But Paul George, Lou Williams, maybe a Luke Kennard or a Mfiondu Kabengele, who was drafted last year, who's an interesting prospect. Would that be something that you think the Rockets would be interested in?
I will say that's one thing that James may be interested in because he's an LA boy and Kawhi's an LA boy, and they actually have a pretty good relationship. So I think James wouldn't mind being LA, probably if that ever happened. I mean, he's from LA. So, but from a Rockets perspective, the Clippers just don't have any picks.
Mm-hmm.
The Clippers just don't have the assets besides Paul George. As a Rockets team, do you just want Paul George and whatever they give you, or do you want assets? I think that's the conversation. I mean, you're giving me all these packages, and I just want to make this point. I think it's all going to come down to if you're the Rockets, and they know what they want, but if you're the Rockets, not every team will have exactly what you want. And it'll come down to a point where if they don't trade him this season, which they have all the leverage not to, they don't trade him this season, you get to next season, and your leverage starts to slowly deteriorate. What are you going to do? Yeah. Right? The time is on their side. They have something the Pelicans didn't have. They have some things. They have things that other teams didn't have when it comes to their stars. 2 years left on the deal, and that includes a player option for a third year. So let's not forget all these things. So I think with that said, you have the ability to wait until you get the exact package you want. And I'll say this because it's kind of like deja vu. When the Rockets traded for James Harden, that's exactly what Daryl Morey did. He waited, he recouped assets. A star was unhappy. Thunder got exactly what they wanted, and the rest is history. One of these NBA teams is going to be in the same boat. They're going to be waiting, gathering assets, come to a point where, like, you know what, let's pull the trigger and get him. Sure. Let's see. I think that could possibly be something. But it comes down to what I said. They want a young cornerstone on their team.
Okay. Teams like Brooklyn, teams like Philadelphia, teams even like Golden State have all sniffed around. As my buddy at The Athletic reported, it's interesting. Let's see what happens. I think it's all going to come down to, do they get their cornerstone and do they get those picks? And if they do, let's see. But they don't have a pack. I haven't heard about them having a package that's really overwhelmed them. Well, I got one coming up for you that could be at least a conversation starter. Okay. Hashtag let's make the Knicks relevant again, people.
Oh,
Bring the mecca of basketball back. Nope. Look, listen to me. At least hear me out, right? The mecca. Look.
No, we're not doing this.
Listen.
Who are they giving back? Mitchell Robinson?
Yeah, hear me out. There's a conversation to be had at least, right? Okay. So obviously the argument from a James Harden perspective is, if you're not going to go to a contender, you're going to go to the greatest place apparently on earth to play basketball in, a place that every basketball player loves to play in, the Garden, right? And so the deal would be something like, you'd have to throw in Julius Randle to make the money work, where Julius Randle's a 1 year expiring anyway, so you can retain him or not. It's up to you. Then you go RJ Barrett, Frank Ntilikina, Kevin Knox, Obi Toppin, They have all of their picks. They have two more, or they have another Dallas pick as well, and every pick swap in the book possible. So potentially this, besides the other two deals that we've talked about with Brooklyn and the 76ers, could be as close to an asking price as we could get. And James Harden could be the leverage that Leon Rose in New York needs to attract something more to New York and make them relevant again for the first time, well, in our lifetimes, basically, besides a little bit with Amari and Melo. Alykhan, thoughts?
I'm gonna let my boys Siobhan and Kays answer this question for me. They already said the answer.
Well, I mean, I'm sure the Knicks. I'm sure the Knicks will say yes because they're the Knicks. But I don't even know.
Yes, though. James Harden's not a power forward. Why would they get him?
Oh, pain.
You know what's funny? You know what's funny about the Knicks? I will say they've actually had not a bad offseason. They have new leadership in place, and they're not willing to give away everything, especially in the Russell Westbrook situation. There was those rumors that they were interested in Russ. From what I understand, they weren't really willing to give up as much as what the Rockets wanted for Russ. So they're not going to just give away picks. They're going to make sure it's a calculated move for them as well. So that being said, I don't know. I just don't see enough on that Knicks roster to really entice the Rockets to make a deal.
In all fairness, and again, we've talked about Russ. I'm not going to keep qualifying how much we like Russ, but James Harden and Russ Westbrook a little bit different on their tiers.
No, I know. Just giving you a perspective on, like, in terms of roster management. They're going to be very cautious about what they do. This is not your 2010 to 2020 Knicks. This is a 2021 Knicks.
Sure.
But maybe I'll eat my words on that after the season. We'll see.
I don't know why you would make that comment.
I think
I am the most spontaneous person on this podcast, and you will never hear a pro Knicks tweet or thing from me.
Well, never say never, because Alykhan is right. They have new leadership all across the board, and we should at least give them the right to prove whether they are still Knicksy or if they are actually different. And I hope that they are, for the sake of basketball. It would be fun if the Knicks are good again. Or
the NBA and your team is a reflection of your ownership. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Boycott James Dolan, bro.
Sometimes that's not necessarily the case. Now, there was a specific coach, Alykhan, you talked about, that continuously watches James Harden's film before they play, or even just for fun. Who can you remind me what coach that was?
It's Greg Popovich.
Well, let's get James Harden to San Antonio then. God. Let's get James Harden to San Antonio in this trade package. Now, this trade package, I have to say, is only if everything that Alykhan has said on this podcast is completely false, and I'm not saying it is, but let's assume it's completely false, and the Rockets want to be relevant right now. They want to build a good, or at least semi-good playoff team right now. And that's the only way this deal would ever happen. Otherwise, it's not fucking happening. Let's just be honest, right? So James Harden, and I want to be nice because I know you like the guy, so I will be nice. Sir Daniel House. Long pause for a reason. Mean joke in there. I'll skip it. James Harden, Daniel House going to San Antonio. Well, remember, Daniel House is apparently the most. Look, Daniel House is the most important player on the Rockets. But guys, remember, that's what NBA Twitter will have you believe after they lost to Lakers in 5. Anyway, besides the point.
He was important to defending LeBron, but that's neither here or there. But
look, I know you're.
Wait, what?
I know you're a Houstonian. You're a big Rockets fan, and you report on them and love them. I'm just going to be honest with you. They weren't winning that series anyway. Irrelevant.
I didn't pick them to win that series.
I know. I'm just saying Daniel House wasn't the reason they lost.
I got to be a lot more competitive, but I didn't pick them to win that series.
Well, I'm just saying Daniel House wasn't the reason they lost, but Rockets Twitter.
Oh, no.
That it was.
I do think it was a big loss for them, though, because he was a part of the rotation they used against LeBron, and he was effective in Game 1. And so I think from that perspective, it really did hurt them.
Well, in this trade package,
I'm not defending the Rockets. I picked the Lakers to win, but I think the Lakers were the better defensive team, especially. But when it comes down to it, there was a big lapse in terms of what happened when Daniel House left in terms of the Rockets defense. But I agree with you. I don't think it's to the extreme of they would have won the series with Daniel House. Absolutely not.
Well, in this case, Daniel House is going to San Antonio, so he's not your problem anyway. Daniel House and James Harden going to hang out with Greg Popovich, who, if there is a coach that can take James Harden to a next level, assuming that's even possible at this point, it would probably be him, right? Again, assuming that's even possible, because he's one of the
Not
best.
Frank Vogel. Come on, guys. That'll be Frank Vogel in this place.
Don't you dare disrespect championship winning Frank Vogel. He's championship winner Frank Vogel to you.
We will not stand for this slander.
I will not.
What about Lloyd Pierce, my guy? What about Lloyd Pierce, my guy?
We'll talk about that.
I'm not sold on Lloyd Pierce.
Look, we'll talk about
the jury's
Hawks.
still out on Lloyd Pierce.
We'll talk about the Hawks in the Eastern Conference preview episode. Today we're not doing that, so we will deter away from that for all intents and purposes. Again, Daniel House, James Harden going to San Antonio. For DeMar DeRozan, that has to be DeMar DeRozan. Devin Vassell, who actually we all three of us, and I don't know about you, Alykhan, but three of us love him on this podcast. We liked him very much as a pick. Derek White.
Yeah, we got a very good mock draft him.
Don't worry about it. Derek White, Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson, DeMar DeRozan, and every possible pick you could ever imagine during Greg Popovich's coaching tenure. And that's the deal. It would at least allow the Rockets to be competitive today, right? DeMar DeRozan is, by the way, ESPN disrespected the shit out of him with their rankings, but DeMar DeRozan is still a very good basketball.
What was his rank, by the way? I didn't take a look at it. What was his rank?
It was
like
in
82nd, I think.
Yeah, it was in the 80s.
It was low 80s, low
80s.
70s, high 80s.
Yeah,
it was bad.
Look, ESPN could be a potential employer for you one day, Alykhan, so I won't ask you to speak on the list. I don't think that's very fair. For that reason, I will stick to DeMar DeRozan was disrespected by a possible future employer for Alykhan, and maybe one of us one day, or all of us. Hopefully all of us. But anyway, DeMar DeRozan,
Heavily.
Devin Vassell, Derek White, Keldon Johnson, and as many picks as you could possibly throw in there. For James Harden and Daniel House, from a Rockets perspective, it allows you to stay competitive, as well as you get a very good defensive guard with Derek White, one of the best in the league. Keldon Johnson showed flashes last year, and Devin Vassell could be a really fun rookie. And throw in Lonnie Walker in the deal too, because it doesn't change the numbers by much. So what do you think from a Rockets perspective? If the goal
would say no.
remain competitive.
They would say no.
Because of the DeMar DeRozan and not a cornerstone young piece, and that's it?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, Shaban, from a Rockets perspective of this could be a competitive basketball team, what do you think?
I don't know if DeMar DeRozan puts him over the top, really. I mean, I think it would be fun
James Harden hasn't put him over the top, so that's not very fair to say put him over the top. Do they remain a competitive basketball team with DeMar DeRozan?
I mean, they'll be in the playoff hunt. Like, that's for sure. Like, that's for certain. I mean, DeMar DeRozan is talented enough to, push a team into playoff territory, even though it didn't happen last season. But, pairing him alongside with John Wall, DeMar DeRozan is, kind of what we said about James Harden in the mid-range. He's a high volume, dead-eye mid-range shooter. And I think that he could probably make Houston competitive. I don't know if it'll be more competitive than they are now, because it's kind of like, what are they really gaining from this, right?
That makes sense. Case, for you, how fun would it be to have Greg Popovich and James Harden on the same basketball team? What are your thoughts on at least?
I think it'd be fantastic on that side of the ball.
That's the only reason why I want
shit.
I also think it's not even ever close to happening.
I said ESPN trade machine trades for a reason. Now, this is the last trade, and then we'll move on to more fun things that you guys, listener, have come here for. This is, again, one of those trades that if the Rockets want to stay competitive today, this is an offer that is at least worth discussing. Potentially the best offer that I've made up here today. Not comparing to the Philly or the Brooklyn deals, which I did not make up, obviously. James Harden goes to the Portland Trailblazers to meet up with Damian Lillard. And in return, CJ McCollum, Anthony Simons, Nasir Little, and a slew of picks that you could possibly put together. Houston already owns 2 of those picks when they got the Rocco deal. They'll get the other 2 and every pick swap you can possibly imagine. Thoughts, Alykhan?
CJ McCollum is 29 years old.
James Harden's 30. James Harden's 30.
As much as I really enjoy watching CJ McCollum play, he's one of my favorite players to watch in the league. It's not a young franchise cornerstone. You don't have that in that deal. Yes, you can have all the picks, but you want a cornerstone for a person to build your franchise around when James Harden's gone. That's the key. And I throughout all these things, there's a common thing. You have these players to win now. Yes, they want to win now, but there's no package besides the Ben Simmons ones you mentioned that really fit that criteria of young cornerstone piece who's going to allow them to stay competitive, make the postseason, and become a contender.
Okay. Shaban, from a basketball perspective, how fun would Damian Lillard and James Harden and Yusuf Nurkic be to watch? And Rocco, buddy Rocco coming. How fun a team would that be, though? Shaban, what do you think?
Man, we're about to see a dickload of threes.
I would just love to see that Damian Lillard, James Harden pick and roll. How do you guard that if you're opposing team? I have no idea.
Well, they'll take turns.
Who sets the screen?
Nurkic, right?
Dame sets the screen.
No, it'd be James Harden and Damian Lillard in the pick and roll. So.
Oh shoot.
Yeah. Dame will set the screen for James. So I'll tell you why. James likes to run that 1-2 pick and roll a lot, and usually Chris Paul or last year Russ will set the screen for him. So I think if he went to Portland, that would continue within that case if you're playing much smaller.
Okay. Well, we're going to wrap up the trade machine. I'm well aware that all these trades would not, and cannot likely ever happen unless you're playing a game of 2K, in which case you can do it.
Aggregators.
Yeah. And then that's why I'm saying that it's important for people, listeners at home, to understand this was just for fun, because if you get the common theme from a Alykhan standpoint, it is the Rockets want young cornerstone and they want picks. From my perspective, and simply just for fuck's sake, James Harden would be fun to watch on all these basketball teams, and it would just be fun as a basketball fan to see that happen. Last one before we wrap up. If Boston called tomorrow, Alykhan, and said Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, is that a conversation starter?
I think that is. I think Jaylen Brown's a fantastic player.
Shoot.
He's
that
so
could be
good. I think so. I mean, Jaylen Brown's fantastic. I mean, you saw him in the bubble. You saw him how he's progressed. I think he's a great player. I don't know, though. This is just my opinion. I don't know, but I think Jaylen Brown could be a good piece to build on.
Sure. And for James Harden, if you are listening, thanks for listening, first off. But secondly, you would look terrible in Celtics green, so don't go there. But fuck Boston.
You want him to go to the Lakers. So I mean,
look,
honestly, I'm good.
Here's what I'll do. Ready? Just for the laugh's sake. Kyle Kuzma, Danny Green, and a first-round pick for any play. Right? We did that for Bradley Beal. We've done it for James.
We don't have Danny Green.
And we don't have Danny Green anymore. We'll give you
Lakers exceptionalism is at it again here, guys. Lakers.
You know what? And for good reason. We are the current NBA champions, even though we won like 60.
I'm gonna tell y'all a secret. All right, I'm gonna tell y'all a secret. Which team do you think I watched the most last season in the NBA?
Well, it has to be the Rockets because you worked.
No,
it was not. It was not.
The Hawks.
Well, it was.
It was not.
From a basketball savant.
The Dallas Mavericks.
Look, the answer is plain and simple. It's the LA Lakers. I know this because you and I have talked offline about this many times. But to have a team in which one of, if not the greatest, but maybe second greatest basketball player of all time, with an incredible Anthony Davis, who could potentially be a Hall of Famer, if not already in some people's minds, to have those two guys on a basketball team is a rarity in itself. We have not seen anything like this with these caliber pieces in a very long time. Some would argue Kobe, Shaq, but even you'd have to go even further, in my opinion, to Magic, Kareem level players to have a comp that is
LeBron.
What this is.
LeBron and AD is so much fun to watch. I mean, you just want to appreciate greatness when you're watching it, right?
Alykhan, you ain't got to tell me twice. You know I love.
I'm telling the listeners, man. And I'm sure all the Lakers exceptionalism listeners to this podcast will agree with that point. So
look, all I'm saying is the difference between Houston and Lakers, not LA Clippers. We're not talking about those clowns. We're talking about the Lakers. The difference then becomes the Lakers talk about rings and the Rockets talk about, look how many years we made the playoffs. There's a difference in conversation. There just is. I'm sorry, but there just is. Now, before we wrap up, we're going to go to K's for Players Anonymous. Alykhan, if you haven't listened before, this is a segment that K's does where he gives us nicknames of players either currently in the NBA or retired NBA. And we, without cheating, because Shaban has a history of cheating.
Not just Shaban.
Guess who this player is. And you're going to, I want you to partake. I think it'll be fun for you to play.
Wait, so it's any player in history?
Well, K's will help us.
I keep it relevant. I'm not gonna do many obscure players.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, he'll help us narrow it down. He'll give us.
Man, if I do bad on this, I'm gonna be embarrassed. I hope I can do good.
Well,
look, honestly, it hasn't been great.
I think Shaban and I are shooting about 50% on these.
That's good.
1-5.
Bro, I'm shooting like 20%, man. I don't know what you're talking about.
Anyway, K's, let's go. Players Anonymous, man.
All right, so the nickname is Skinny. That's all it is. That's all you get for this week.
All right, it's definitely not Jokic.
It could be Brandon Ingram. It could be Kevin Durant.
All right, look, He was the 5th overall pick in the 2000 draft for the Orlando Magic. Some career stats. He was on the all-rookie team. He was the rookie of the year.
Oh no.
He was 6th man of the year in 2005, 2006. And he is a 2-time NBA champion.
No, he's not not Hito Turkoglu.
Alykhan immediately goes, nope, not Hito. And well, that's a stupid question.
All right,
Did he
I'll
win
give
his
you one more
championships?
obscure stat.
Okay.
He holds the record for most threes made in the NBA Finals with one shoe on.
Mike Miller?
Mike Miller.
There you
Mike
go.
Miller.
Wow, good
There
shit.
you go.
I did not know he was drafted by the Magic. That's
I
a
did not know
great,
that.
No, I did
5th
not know.
overall.
great trivia question.
Fifth overall.
overall,
Oh
by the
man,
way.
Mike Miller was a beast.
That was good. That was really good.
Rookie of the year, Mike Miller, by the way. I did not know that.
Shoot, I did not know that either. In 2000.
So if you want an insight to this segment, I will literally sit on Basketball Reference, just typing in names, seeing if the nicknames are interesting.
Wait. Can I give you one for next podcast episode? Is that fine?
Yeah.
You want to just do it right
It's not like Safe and Shaban are here. We
Well,
could do
not
a
now,
special host,
offline.
Players Anonymous.
He's talking about offline, bro.
Yeah, hit me up, bro. At Case Charania.
At WebM Pod.
It's like Shams, but I have a Y before the A.
Oh, true.
Oh yeah. I'll let Shums
Yeah.
know that you're one of his long lost cousins or something. So.
Well,
Honestly, the
Yeah,
family's
cousin
so
Shams.
big, he'd probably believe it.
The Chirania clan.
So for you,
We plant forests.
for you listener at home, I hope you enjoyed this special podcast. This is we're going to wrap it up, and the next thing you'll hear, we're going to put out a Western Conference preview for every single team in the league. But in the meantime, thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode. See ya!
Peace.
Bye.
Bryant for the win. Bang! Kutzke for 3. You got